You feel like something is missing, but you cannot explain what it is. You finish each day feeling vaguely unsatisfied, even when nothing obviously went wrong. You say you are fine when someone asks, but fine is not the same as good. You are eating, sleeping, working, socializing, doing all the things you are supposed to do, and yet something underneath feels stuck, heavy, or slowly shrinking. You are not in a crisis. You are not obviously failing, but you are not truly thriving either. And the reason might not be your circumstances, your luck, or your personality. It might be a small collection of completely ordinary habits that have slowly, invisibly, been stealing your energy, your joy, and your potential. Welcome to our podcast. I am Emma, and today with my co-host Alex, we are going to shine a light on the habits hiding in plain sight that might be quietly destroying your life.
Hello everyone, I am Alex, and I want to say immediately, this conversation is not about shame or judgment. The habits we are discussing today are not character flaws. They are patterns, learned, reinforced, and normalized by our culture, our upbringing, and our environment. Almost everyone has at least some of them. I certainly have had several, and some I am still working on. What makes these habits so dangerous is not their intensity, it is their invisibility. A dramatic crisis forces your attention. A quiet habit flies completely under your radar while compounding its damage year after year. By the time you notice something is wrong, years may have passed. Our goal today is simply to make these habits visible, because once you can see something clearly, you have the power to choose differently.
Let us begin with a habit that is so ordinary, so culturally encouraged, and so widely practiced that it barely registers as a problem: the habit of constant comparison. We compare our homes to our neighbors' homes, our careers to our colleagues' careers, our bodies to the images we see online, our relationships to the highlight reels of other people's lives. We compare our behind-the-scenes reality to everyone else's polished performance. And because social media has given us an endless, curated gallery of other people's best moments, available 24 hours a day, the opportunity for comparison has never been greater in human history. The consequence is a persistent low-level feeling of inadequacy, the quiet sense that you are always slightly behind where you should be.
Constant comparison is psychologically corrosive in ways that are often not fully appreciated, Emma. Theodore Roosevelt famously said that comparison is the thief of joy, and modern psychology strongly supports this observation. When we compare ourselves to others, we are almost always making what researchers call an upward social comparison, comparing ourselves to someone who appears to have more, to be more, or to have achieved more. This reliably produces feelings of inadequacy, envy, and dissatisfaction. And unlike historical forms of comparison, which were limited to your immediate community, social media enables us to compare ourselves simultaneously to thousands of carefully curated images of success, beauty, happiness, and achievement. We are exposing our real selves to an infinite gallery of idealized others. No self-image survives this kind of comparison intact over time.
The infinite gallery of idealized others. What a painful and accurate description of social media. Now I want to talk about a habit that silently undermines physical health, mental clarity, and emotional stability: the habit of chronic dehydration. This sounds almost too simple to be important, but most people do not drink nearly enough water throughout the day. They drink coffee in the morning, perhaps as soda with lunch, and fill the rest of their day with almost no plain water at all. The human brain is approximately 75% water. Even mild dehydration, as small as 1 to 2% of body weight, measurably impairs cognitive function, concentration, mood, and energy levels. Many people spend their days in a mild but constant state of dehydration and simply accept the resulting foggy thinking and low energy as normal.
Chronic mild dehydration is a perfect example of what we might call a stealth habit, Emma, something so mundane and so pervasive that it escapes conscious examination entirely. And you're right that the cognitive effects are significant. Research has shown that dehydration impairs short-term memory, reduces concentration, increases feelings of anxiety and tension, and produces fatigue. What makes this particularly insidious is that by the time you actually feel thirsty, you are already meaningfully dehydrated. Thirst is a lagging indicator. The solution is genuinely simple. Drink water consistently throughout the day, before you feel thirsty. But simple does not always mean easy when a habit of non-drinking is already established. Starting with a glass of water first thing in the morning is one of the highest leverage health habits available.
Such a simple but powerful change. Now let us discuss a habit that feels productive but actively makes you less effective: the habit of multitasking. Multitasking modern culture celebrates. Being able to do many things at once is presented as a skill, a virtue, a sign of competence and efficiency. People proudly describe themselves as great multitaskers. But cognitive science is very clear. True simultaneous multitasking, doing two cognitively demanding tasks at the same time, is neurologically impossible for human beings. What we call multitasking is actually rapid task switching, bouncing your attention back and forth between tasks very quickly, and each switch carries a cognitive cost, a brief but real period of mental reset, reorientation, and lost momentum. Chronic multitasking does not make you more productive. It makes every individual task slower, lower quality, and more mentally exhausting.
The multitasking myth is one of the most persistent and damaging misconceptions in modern productivity culture, Emma. Research by Gloria Mark at the University of California found that the average person switches between tasks every 3 to 5 minutes, and that this constant switching significantly raises cortisol levels, the primary stress hormone. So multitasking is not just less effective than focused work, it is actively stressful. It keeps your nervous system in a low-level state of alert and fragmentation that accumulates into significant fatigue by the end of the day. People often arrive home from work exhausted and cannot identify why, because they did not do any single thing for a long enough period to feel the satisfying completion of it. Fragmented attention produces fragmented satisfaction.
Fragmented attention producing fragmented satisfaction. That is such a precise description of how modern work can feel. Now, I want to talk about something that touches relationships at their foundation: the habit of tolerating toxic relationships without honest examination. Many people have relationships in their lives: friendships, family connections, romantic partnerships, or professional relationships that consistently leave them feeling drained, diminished, criticized, or unvalued. And yet they maintain these relationships out of habit, out of loyalty, out of fear of conflict, or simply because ending or transforming a relationship feels like a bigger disruption than continuing to absorb the damage. But our relationships are arguably the most powerful environmental factor, shaping our emotional health, our self-image, and our daily experience of life. Bad relationships are not merely unpleasant, they are actively harmful over time.
The tolerance of toxic relationships is something people often rationalize with admirable-sounding reasons: loyalty, compassion, family obligation, shared history. And these reasons are not always wrong. Relationships are complex, and wholesale abandonment of difficult relationships is not always wise or even possible. But there is an important distinction between choosing to work on a relationship that has real value despite its difficulties and simply enduring a relationship that is consistently harmful without honest acknowledgement of the damage it is doing. Many people never actually examine their relationships with clear eyes and ask honestly, does this relationship, on balance, make my life better or worse? Does this person treat me with basic respect and care? Am I growing in this relationship or shrinking?
Those are such important and clarifying questions to ask about any relationship. Now I want to discuss a habit that quietly steals enormous amounts of time and mental energy: the habit of overthinking. Overthinkers analyze decisions long past the point of useful deliberation. They replay past conversations, looking for what they should have said differently. They project into every possible future scenario, trying to mentally prepare for all of them. They revisit decisions already made, wondering if they chose correctly. And all of this mental activity, which feels like useful thinking, is largely unproductive. Past events cannot be changed by thinking about them. Future events are too uncertain to be meaningfully prepared for through imagination alone. Overthinking consumes mental energy without producing genuine insight or better outcomes.
Overthinking is one of the most exhausting habits that can afflict an intelligent person, Emma. And there is a painful paradox here. The habit often disproportionately affects people who are thoughtful, conscientious, and genuinely committed to making good decisions. Their very care about getting things right becomes the engine of their mental exhaustion. I also want to distinguish between useful deliberation and overthinking. Useful deliberation involves gathering relevant information, considering the most likely significant outcomes, and making a timely decision. Overthinking involves repeating the same considerations again and again without new information or insights, long after a timely decision has become impossible. The distinction is not always obvious from the inside. One practical signal: if your thinking is producing anxiety and paralysis rather than clarity and action, you are almost certainly overthinking.
Anxiety and paralysis as signals of overthinking rather than useful deliberation. That is such a helpful practical distinction. Now, let me talk about something that is rarely identified as a harmful habit because it is so deeply embedded in how many people operate: the habit of perfectionism. Perfectionism is often presented as a positive trait, proof of high standards, dedication, and commitment to quality. But research consistently distinguishes between healthy high standards and pathological perfectionism. The difference lies in the relationship with failure and imperfection. Healthy high standards allow for imperfect output and learning from mistakes. Pathological perfectionism treats any imperfection as evidence of fundamental inadequacy. The consequence is paralysis, procrastination, and a chronic inability to experience satisfaction in your own work and achievements.
Perfectionism as a disguised form of self-punishment is such an important reframing, Emma. The perfectionist does not simply want things to be good. They feel that anything less than perfect reflects something fundamentally wrong with them as a person. This means that completing a task well is almost never genuinely satisfying because the focus immediately shifts to what is imperfect about the result. The goalposts are permanently set at a level that ensures chronic dissatisfaction. And there is a related consequence. Perfectionism is one of the primary drivers of procrastination. If the only acceptable outcome is perfection, then beginning something imperfect, which all beginnings inherently are, feels psychologically threatening. Many perfectionist people therefore postpone beginning because an imperfect start feels worse to them than no start at all.
An imperfect start feeling worse than no start at all. I think many listeners just recognize themselves in that description. Now I want to address a habit that silently weakens the foundation of long-term health: the habit of ignoring your body's signals. Your body communicates with you constantly, through fatigue, through pain, through tension, through digestive discomfort, through headaches, through changes in sleep quality. But most people have developed a sophisticated habit of overriding these signals in order to keep up with daily demands and commitments. We take a painkiller and keep working. We feel exhausted and drink more coffee. We notice stress-related physical tension and schedule it for attention later. Later, that never arrives. This chronic disconnection from physical signals means that small, manageable issues are regularly allowed to develop into serious health problems.
The habit of ignoring physical signals is something that modern productivity culture actively encourages, Emma. Pushing through fatigue, working through illness, overriding hunger and rest needs in service of external demands, these are often presented as virtues rather than warning signs. But the body's signals exist for important evolutionary reasons. Pain indicates tissue damage or threat. Fatigue indicates the need for recovery and rest. Persistent digestive issues often reflect chronic stress or dietary problems. Ignoring these signals consistently does not make them go away. It delays and compounds the consequences. I think one of the most important habits anyone can develop is the practice of brief, regular body awareness, simply checking in with your physical state a few times each day and genuinely responding to what you notice.
Brief, regular body awareness, such a simple but profound practice. I want to talk now about a social habit that quietly corrodes character and relationships: the habit of gossip. Gossip, talking about absent people, sharing critical information about others, participating in social commentary about people's choices, relationships, or failures, is one of the most normalized social behaviors in human communities. It creates a sense of social bonding and belonging in the short term, but regular gossip has significant long-term costs. It trains your attention to scan for the negative in others. It creates a mental habit of judgment and criticism. It slowly damages your own reputation because people who gossip regularly are rarely fully trusted. And it prevents the development of genuine depth and directness that meaningful relationships require.
The reputation cost of gossip is something people rarely calculate honestly, Emma. When you gossip about someone to a mutual acquaintance, a part of that person's brain registers something important. You are someone who shares private or critical information about absent people, and that registration fundamentally affects how much they will trust you with their own private thoughts, vulnerabilities, and genuine experiences. Gossip creates superficial closeness through shared judgment of others, but it undermines the deeper trust that genuine intimacy requires. There is also a fascinating psychological principle at work. Research shows that the traits we habitually attribute to others tend to become associated in the minds of our listeners with us. Consistently describing others as dishonest, selfish, or inadequate actually affects how others perceive you.
That psychological principle, that the traits we attribute to others become associated with us, is genuinely surprising and important. Now I want to discuss a habit that is extremely common but rarely examined: the habit of living on autopilot. Many people move through entire days, weeks, and months in a state of automatic, habitual behavior, following the same routines, having the same conversations, eating the same foods, watching the same kinds of entertainment, thinking the same thoughts, without ever making a genuine conscious choice about any of it. Life becomes a script that runs itself. This is not inherently wrong. Habits and routines serve important functions of efficiency and cognitive conservation. But when autopilot extends to all areas of life, the result is a profound loss of genuine presence, intentionality, and meaning.
Living on autopilot is something that happens gradually and imperceptibly, Emma. It is not a dramatic choice to stop being present in your own life. It is the slow accumulation of days where you chose the comfortable and the familiar over the intentional and the new. And the consequence is a peculiar kind of dissatisfaction that is hard to name precisely, a feeling that time is passing quickly without anything meaningful happening, that your years are blurring together, that you cannot quite remember the last thing that genuinely surprised or excited you. Research on the subjective experience of time is consistent. Time feels faster when we are on autopilot and slower, richer, and more memorable when we are engaged in new and novel experiences that require genuine conscious attention and presence.
Time feeling faster when we are on autopilot? That explains so much about why years seem to disappear without feeling fully lived. I also want to talk about a habit that sabotages personal growth in a particularly subtle way: the habit of waiting for motivation before acting. Most people operate with the belief that motivation must come first, and then action follows. You wait until you feel like exercising before you exercise. You wait until you feel inspired before you write. You wait until you feel confident before you apply for the opportunity. But behavioral psychology and the lived experience of high performers consistently reveal a different truth. Motivation is not a prerequisite for action. It is far more often a consequence of action. You rarely feel like starting, but once you start, the motivation to continue typically follows.
The action-motivation sequence, that action precedes motivation rather than following it, is one of the most practically important insights in behavioral psychology, Emma, and it has a solid neurological basis. The brain's reward circuits are activated by engagement with a task, not by thinking about a task from a distance. The moment you begin, dopamine begins to flow. Momentum begins to build. The resistance that felt overwhelming from a distance diminishes the moment you are actually engaged. This is why behavioral approaches to overcoming inaction consistently recommend starting with the smallest possible version of the desired behavior, so small that the resistance to beginning it is negligible. 2 minutes of writing, 1 set of exercise, 5 minutes of studying. The beginning is the entire battle.
The beginning is the entire battle, and the beginning needs to be small enough to actually happen. I want to address something that affects the quality of daily life in a way that is profoundly underestimated: the habit of rushing through meals. In many people's lives, eating has been reduced to a functional transaction, fuel consumed as quickly and conveniently as possible while doing something else. Eating while working, eating while scrolling, eating while driving, eating while standing over the kitchen counter. The problem is physiological as well as psychological. The digestive system is designed to function optimally in a relaxed state. Stress and distraction during eating significantly impair digestion. Eating too quickly prevents the satiety signals, the hormones that tell your brain you are full, from registering properly, leading to overconsumption.
The physiological disruption of distracted, rushed eating is genuinely significant, Emma. Research consistently shows that people who eat quickly and while distracted consume meaningfully more food per meal than those who eat slowly and with attention. The satiety hormone leptin requires approximately 20 minutes after eating begins to signal fullness to the brain. If you eat a meal in 8 minutes while watching your phone, you have finished eating before your brain has received the signal to stop. Beyond the physiological dimension, there is something important about the relationship with food and pleasure. Eating is one of life's most consistent and accessible sources of genuine pleasure.
When we reduce it to a rushed, unconscious transaction, we eliminate from daily life one of its reliable small joys.
Eliminating daily small joys through mindless rushing, that dimension of rushed eating is rarely considered. I want to talk now about a habit that directly undermines the quality of our closest relationships, the habit of not fully listening. Most people, when someone they care about is speaking, are not actually listening in any deep sense. They are hearing the words while simultaneously formulating their own response, thinking about something else, or waiting for the part of the conversation that concerns them. Genuine, full listening, giving your complete, undivided attention to another person, and genuinely trying to understand their experience, rather than simply waiting for your turn to speak, is surprisingly rare. And people can almost always feel the difference between being genuinely heard and being merely talked at.
Genuine listening is arguably one of the most profound gifts one human being can offer, Emma, and it costs only attention. Yet attention is precisely what we are most reluctant to give fully in an era of constant digital stimulation and distraction. There is a meaningful distinction between listening to respond and listening to understand. When we listen to respond, we are processing the other person's words through the filter of our own agenda, looking for openings to share our view, our advice, our similar experience. When we listen to understand, we are genuinely trying to enter the other person's experience and see what they see. This shift from responsive listening to understanding-centered listening transforms the quality of relationships in ways that are immediately felt by everyone involved.
Listening to understand rather than listening to respond, that distinction changes everything about how connection feels. As we approach our conclusion, I want to address one final habit that quietly diminishes life over time, the habit of never celebrating your own progress. Many people have a very well-developed capacity for self-criticism and a very underdeveloped capacity for self-acknowledgement. They complete a difficult project and immediately move to the next challenge without pausing to recognize what they accomplished. They overcome a personal struggle and then immediately identify the next thing that is wrong. They reach a goal and immediately reset the bar without allowing themselves a moment of genuine satisfaction and pride. This perpetual forward pressure, always focusing on the next inadequacy rather than the current achievement, creates a life where nothing is ever quite enough.
The inability to acknowledge and celebrate your own genuine progress is connected to something psychologists call the arrival fallacy, Emma, the repeated experience of reaching a desired destination and not finding the satisfaction you anticipated. But I think there is another dimension here that is even more practically significant. Celebration and acknowledgement of progress are not just emotionally pleasant. They are neurologically important for sustaining motivation and building positive behavioral momentum. When you pause, acknowledge, and genuinely feel satisfaction about progress made, your brain registers the behavior as rewarding and increases its drive to repeat it. Self-acknowledgement is not vanity or complacency. It is a fundamental biological reinforcement mechanism for the very behaviors and habits that make your life better.
And with that genuinely encouraging final thought, it is time for us to close. Alex and I have covered a wide range of quiet, ordinary habits today. Constant comparison, chronic dehydration, multitasking, tolerating toxic relationships, overthinking, perfectionism, ignoring body signals, gossip, living on autopilot, waiting for motivation, rushing through meals, not fully listening, and never celebrating progress. Every single one of these habits is changeable. Every single one becomes visible the moment you choose to honestly look. And that is the most important step, honest seeing. Not judgment, not shame, not a dramatic resolution to change everything at once. Just the simple, courageous act of looking at your own patterns with honesty and compassion, and choosing one small thing to do differently beginning today.
Emma's closing message is exactly right. The goal of this conversation was never to overwhelm you with a list of your failures. The goal was to make invisible things visible, because we cannot consciously choose what we cannot see. If one idea from today's episode landed for you, if one habit was identified that you recognized in yourself and want to address, then this conversation has done its entire job. Start there, only there. Choose one habit, one small change, and give it your genuine and patient attention for the next 30 days. Do not try to transform everything simultaneously. Real, lasting change is always built from small, specific, consistent choices made over time. Thank you sincerely for listening today. We are genuinely glad you were here, and we will see you in the next episode.